So even though there's a bright light shining on me, there's a bright light shining in you right now. And most of us don't really notice it in ourselves or in other people. But if you were here last week, I had this weird title. Can we go to the next slide, please? What the heck does that mean, right? Balance between bliss and buttons, or something like that. Buttons and bliss. See, I don't even know it. But the idea is we are spiritual beings. That's the bliss part. But we're having this human experience where people are pushing your buttons and making you feel those negative emotions. It's all their fault. Not. And what I reminded you of last week was there's a main story that runs through traditional Christianity that says that you are born in original sin, that's your nature. And Unity has a different point of view of that. The way that we see it is that instead of a literal Adam and Eve who were placed in a garden and then cast out because they disobeyed God, that you and I were spiritual beings in a spiritual dimension you might call heaven, and we wanted the experience of this physical dimension that would allow us to not be ourselves, but to feel something different. When you're in bliss all the time, when you have a joint mind with the mind of God, when you can experience everything all at once with each other, and there's only one and you really know it, it's hard to really understand what that's all about until you understand what it's not about. And so this dimension, this physical dimension, is helping us as spiritual beings know what our true nature is not about. And every time that we bump into somebody that behaves differently than us, or we have a challenge of some kind, we go, oh, this is what we're not about. This is what that feels like. That helps me understand more about what infinite supply is, what infinite love is, when I can experience what I'm not, or what it is not. And so last week we really focused on who we are. Today we're going to focus more on why we chose to come here. That we were not cast out of a garden and determined to be sinful in nature, but we chose as spiritual beings to come into this heavier, slower dimension where we forgot who we are. We come in with this veil over, and it's our brain, it's our ego, it's just the physicality of the body that blocks our ability to remember. And let's face it, if we could remember who we were, the game would be over and we wouldn't be able to come in and learn. We might as well just stay where we are. So we came here knowing that we were going to forget who we are, and that's not an easy assignment for Spirit to choose, but we did. So trust that you had a good reason for coming here, even though it feels difficult. And even though it's hard to remember at any given moment who we are, and that the Spirit of God is seeking to express fully through us all the time, we have let the physicality of us kind of dominate our life, our physical bodies, our 5 physical senses, seeing and hearing and touching, tasting, all that good stuff. It's so dominant, you feel it so immediately, that it has been what's guided our choices and made us feel good or bad. I'm a big fan of chocolate peanut butter ice cream, so I try and get as much of that as possible, as you can see. And yet, our goal here is to awaken beyond those physical senses. And we usually make our decisions based on the heaviness of this experience to protect ourselves, because our brain and our ego is working all the time to make sure that you don't get ahead of me, that you don't take what is mine, that I have something that I want to experience. I get it right now. Nobody gets in my way. And that is just so not an expression of who we are as spiritual beings. Here comes Parker. I'll just take a break. Thank you, Parker. See, so this is an example of being in the physical dimension. I don't know what the heck was going on back here, but evidently it had your attention. So thank you for that. And that's like, how many of you were like, that's distracting to me? Okay. So that was spirit. That was spirit playing with you to prove my point. Thank you, spirit. That was awesome. Awesome. Because you had a choice at that moment to like get caught up in the physicality of what's going on or choose to be present, take a breath, focus on what you really want to be here for. See how that works? It's about being awake. And I totally get it when you get caught up in the story, because that's what the challenge of this experience is all about. And yet you might just wonder why would we choose to come here when we knew that this is the way it's going to be? Now, if we were asking Taylor Swift that question, she'd probably say, well, hey, come on, fame, beauty, talent, and a lot of money. Why not come here? But my hunch is she has challenges. We all have challenges, right? If you're a parent, you've had challenges. If you're a garbage collector, if you're an IRS agent, if you're just anybody on the planet, you have had challenges in this experience. And you might ask yourself, if I really am a spiritual being that's eternal, why would I come here for these challenges? So last week I started reading to you from my new favorite book called A Walk in the Physical. If we can show that up on the screen here. Christian Sundberg started a meditation practice, and he suddenly had memories of who he was as a spiritual being before he came here. And not just, who he was, but kind of how the universe and everything beyond that works. It is so cool to hear his point of view, and you can take it or leave it. I have no attachment. But there's some fun stuff here that I wanted to share with you just to kind of get you thinking. So he said, this is when he's still a spirit. He's never been to planet Earth. He said, I remember being inspired long, long ago by a great being of light who had himself experienced a physical incarnation. When I came across this being, I was completely taken aback by the radiance, richness, joy, and power of his nature and essence, which I could plainly see and feel. I asked this being what he had done to become this, and he telepathically, see, we can just, behold each other's thoughts. He telepathically shared that he had lived physical lifetimes. One in particular was exceptionally difficult for him because he had suffered from a chronic and painful physical condition. But, listen, through how he chose to meet that condition and through how he integrated that experience, he refined to a degree that was utterly astounding. This is as a spiritual being. I was deeply inspired. I communicated to him definitively, I am going to do that. Can't you just hear yourself doing that? I'm going to do that. He was loving, but responded at first something to the effect of, yeah, that's what they all say. This is difficult in a way that you have never known before. But I was persistent. He encouraged me to approach my guides if I wished to pursue this path, and I did. Because of that initial inspiration, I set out to embark on the long journey of physical lifetimes to refine the quality of my own being and increase my capacity for joy, creativity, and love. I've had many, many experiences since then. We're going to hear from him a couple more times yet today. So he was excited about coming here, even though it was challenging, because he wanted to be that richer, more vibrant expression of who he was as an expression of God. So we come here to expand and evolve our soul, to learn more deeply about our own spiritual qualities and what they really mean and how they really can create. And we go from this all that is consciousness, where we're one with that, where we understand and can be all that is, down to a very specific lifetime, a very specific expression of who we are. So specific that we don't know what anybody else is thinking. So specific that we can only be in charge of this body. We can't really help one another because we're so focused and have such a veil over our awareness that we can only know what's happening to this thing right here. through that experience, it doesn't really matter whether it's positive or negative. Even harsh experiences is a way for our soul to go, now I know more of what love is because I can see what it's not. So we expand in who we are as spiritual beings, and our potential expands with it, which means we can do more, we can be more, both in the physical and the spiritual dimension. This land that we come to is filled with, we use the word contrast as one way to describe it. Contrast is differences, diversities. You're going down a certain path and you've got a plan and you know where you're going and what you're going to do and who you're going to do it with, and something comes up and blows it up and puts something else in your way. That's contrast. Okay? And we came here because this is the land of contrast. In this world, there will be tribulation, Jesus said. And everywhere we look, there is variety and differences. There's rich and poor. There's sick and well. There's love and hate. There's black and white, gay and straight. There's all kinds of differences and diversity here. And here's the deal. When you run into something different than you, this is, usually a response from the ego is, whoa, hold up, because it doesn't have oneness consciousness any longer. Most of us are still without that oneness consciousness. When we run into variety, it can be threatening. If you're this, or if I'm this and you're that, who's going to win here if there's some kind of need? If you're that and I'm this, who is right? Who is better and who is worse? Those are challenges for your spirit to process. Remember how he said how the spirit that he ran into on the other side was like, depending on how you process this, you can grow and evolve, or you can just get stuck in that challenge for a while until it feels worse and worse. So no matter the differences that you run into, it's kind of a spectrum between feeling curious about this difference all the way down the spectrum to violence about this difference. You know what I'm saying? And the question is, who do you want to be? Because you can set an intention to move through this with love, and your soul will evolve joyfully into a higher expression of that divine nature. Or you can get lost in the problem, and you can set an intention to move through this with fear, and then you just get stuck in that challenge, and it's hard to get out. Your growth potential, you have growth potential, whether it's darkness or light that you're going through, but my belief is that the more you can align your heart and your mind with the mind of God and the heart of God as you're going through it, the more effective your result will be in demonstrating this purposeful path that you came here to walk. I was reading from Christian Sundberg. He says up here on the screen, he says, "We wish to expand our joy and creative power by participating in creation. And we wish to evolve the quality of our being so we can more deeply experience and express love and joy in a variety of creative contexts." So how are we doing at that? What chance do we have when we come here with amnesia? We don't really know who we are. So today is Palm Sunday on the Christian calendar. Did anybody grow up in a church that celebrated Palm Sunday? Okay. I couldn't find any palms for you, I'm sorry, but we'll talk about them. How's that? Palm Sunday involves the last week of Jesus' life. It's the beginning of the Holy Week. And we look at Jesus as our way shower. Last week I said that we see him not as the great exception, but the great example. So he came here either awake or woke up to his spiritual nature. And he began to live from that 24/7. Last week we talked about how he had some difficulties like you and I have, but not as many as you and I have. And that ultimately he began to express his Christ nature. So that's where Jesus Christ comes from. The Christ is the word we use to define God expressing individually as each of us. He got there. He awoke to that. And then he began to live it. And he began to show us how to do it, call us to follow him over and over again. And the thing about his life was, one of the first things he came in teaching and then taught through his whole ministry was, the kingdom of God is here. You're a spiritual being, not a human being. Your Father is spirit, and your nature is love. So he demonstrated that. He taught that regularly. That would have been like an alien from another planet coming and saying, you're a Martian. Your real skin is green. No, he was coming here. That was supposed to be funny. So instead, he's saying, you're a spiritual being. Don't call human beings your father. And we are brothers and sisters in this. It's not just my Father. Everyone has the same spiritual creator, the source, and we are one with that. And then he began to walk a life that demonstrated how to be that. And his method, this purposeful path that we see him walk in the scriptures, is one that we're called to, but it means giving up this belief that there's many of us and instead focusing on the oneness of us. What you do to others, you do to yourself, and that in truth, there is no duality. He talked about how we should be in the world, but not of it. In other words, it's a walk in the physical. Let's take a walk in the physical as spiritual beings. He was trying to get us to recognize our purpose here is to reveal more of the Spirit within us, our divine potential. And we do that not only to grow ourselves, but everything we do for good, everything we do that expresses divine qualities is contributing to the whole, because we're still one, even though we don't remember it. So keep your thoughts on that. As we go through the next 7 steps that I chose to pull out from his life, where he demonstrated his purposeful path. We don't have the same path as he had. He had a different intention, and he was well aware of that intention. But how he walked it towards the end, if he can do that, then we probably can do similar steps in our minor intentions from moment to moment. First of all, he knew and spoke of it regularly that he was going to be put to death and that he would rise again, back to life. And he would talk to his disciples about that. And he described it in the book of Luke, up here on the screen. He said, chapter 9:22, the Son of Man, that was how he was describing himself, must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. So this first step that we take on a purposeful path, step number 1 is to embrace the calling, to acknowledge it, to accept it, to identify it, to own it. This is my path. Now, I'm not talking about, I mean, he had a big purpose and he was expressing that. I'm just talking about when I go to work today, I'm going to be at peace. I'm not going to get ticked off at my coworker. That's a good intention. Set that first. I am a peaceful person in this world. That's your intention. My intention every time I go to the grocery store, every time I have to stand in line, my intention is to be peaceful. Okay? So step 1, embrace your calling. And you do that by talking about it. You say it out loud to yourself or to anybody who's listening. You know, every time somebody else brings up the inflation or the interest rates or a shortage or a lack or a layoff of some kind, your intention might be, I see the abundance of God everywhere present. Use those words to set that thought in your consciousness, because it's going to sink in ultimately into the subconscious, and the subconscious is responsible for your actions 95% of the time. So you say the words, you envision the result. You see the end result. Instead of how am I going to get there, you just go with, at the end of all this walking down my path, I will be a peaceful person. I will be a loving person. I am a loving person. And you just start seeing what that life would be like. That's how you own your intention. Charles, I'm so used to saying Charles Fillmore, and I will in a minute. But right now we're back to Christian Sundberg up here. He said, no matter the type of experience we entertain, no matter how dark it is or how dark it may seem, we're always beings of love and creative power. As immortal spirits, we're bold in the depths to which we are willing to go in the name of creativity and love. So, you might want to just start off simple. Don't have to change the entire world on your path, but just choose what your heart and your ego is ready to follow along with. And the second step here is to persistently choose the highest thought about this. Now, as soon as you make a decision that you feel your heart is calling you into, hey, you want to get married? Or, hey, I'm going to quit this job and go start something that's more fulfilling. And it feels like your heart is calling you into this, and suddenly you begin to have second thoughts, and third thoughts, and fourth thoughts coming from the ego. Or sometimes coming from your best friends. Are you sure you want to do that? So Jesus told about it this way. Matthew 16, he had just been sharing with his disciples. Once again, he will soon experience suffering and be killed and be raised again. And then it says in 16, verse 21, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. There's his friend, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but human things. That last phrase is so important when either your ego or your best friend or your mother tells you, are you sure you want to do that? You're setting your mind not on divine things, my friend, but human things. We're here to persistently choose the highest thought. It is not I, but the Christ within that will do this work. With God, all things are possible. And it's this kind of thought that we want to think over and over again that will help move us past the fears, keeping our mind on truth. John, in the book of John, here's Jesus again, chapter 12. Now my soul is troubled. And what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It is for this reason that I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Now, that can be a scary thing to do, but I'm going to challenge you to persist in that thought. When you are up against that wall, when you feel like the world is challenging you beyond your means, for this I have come. For this reason, for this emotion, for this challenge, for this deprivation, for this separation, for this unsurety, I have come. Not to let the ego win, but to turn to that higher presence of God within to guide me through this. For this I have come, to glorify, to reveal my divine potential in this. And he's demonstrating that he is remembering his purpose. He is planning on revealing his eternal nature. It's a perfect demonstration of what we speak of as our third principle in unity, our divine law, which is basically that we create this life experience with the things that we think and feel and believe on a regular basis. So, will I do that? Will I keep my focus on that divine law and use it purposefully? That I am focused on God's good in this, and that gives way for it to express in our life. Again, Christian Sundberg up here on the screen said, our creative nature always operates. We alter the contents of our personal and collective experience by the nature of our own thoughts, beliefs, and intentions. Be reminded of your power today. Reality, the universe, all that is listening to you. What are you saying to it? The divine law is listening to you. Whatever you're saying to it, you're attracting back to you. So this is, again, another choice. Persistently choose the highest thought about this path that you're walking. Our third step is to make plans about this path. A lot of times it's easy to want something of a higher nature or a lower nature just because it feels good. But we don't take the time to really think it through, to ask ourselves what would be required here in order to get to that place of purpose. And in Jesus' case, he was facing the last week of his life and knew that at the end of the week, his life would be over, but that he would come back to life again. So he made plans for that. Not only was he telling his disciples all about it along the way, he asked someone to prepare a donkey for him to ride in on. He made sure that he was in Jerusalem where all people were hanging out at the same time that would contribute to this death. And he had to find and make things in order for this to happen. So he arranges for that to happen. And it says in the book of Luke again, chapter 9:51, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He made plans, and he resolutely followed those plans. He got on that donkey, and he headed for Jerusalem, where he knew he would be killed. So put yourself in that place. Nothing that severe, I promise, but something you don't want to do. Trust that when you make plans, ways to get there, tell people about it, involve them in your plans, it will be a lot easier to achieve your goal. And it will give you the strength that you need to see it through. It will call forth your power of strength and your power of will when you make those plans. And step 4 is release the struggle about it. Stop resisting. Let go and go with the flow. People thought that when Jesus came to town, they were there to greet him with palms. That's why we call it Palm Sunday. They'd even lay him on the road with their cloaks for his donkey to walk over. They thought he was coming into town as their deliverer or Messiah. And their view of that was he was ready to rumble. He was going to start a power struggle. He was going to get their rule back in their hands, take it away from, overthrow the Roman government so that the Jews could be in charge again. And that's what they were expecting of him. And here he comes, riding in on a donkey, not on a war horse, wasn't carrying a sword, wasn't preaching revolution. He was there with peace in his heart to demonstrate love and healing in that final week of his life. And that nature is the choice that we can make when we're going into that difficult situation, and we can kind of see our goal at the end, but there's some stuff in between us. Are we going to push against that, or are we just going to go with the flow? Stay conscious of those higher thoughts. Stay with an energy that is representative of our spirit instead of our ego as we take those steps. Christian said, in relinquishing all resistance and simply being present with what is, awareness naturally sees past the forms that were distracting it. That sees past the forms that were distracting it and is once again known that joy is always here. The Tao is another way to experience the divine in your life. There's many different paths to God. The Tao would say, work without working. Do your work without struggling against the work, complaining about the work, fighting that you have to do the work. And that's the way that you not only accomplish your task, but you do it revealing joy in the process. Step 5 is to feel whatever feeling you're going to have about this. It might be fear, it might be doubt, might be even anger. Don't get stuck there. You know, in Jesus' case, it was the night he was arrested, and he had a meal with his disciples, and they'd gone to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he'd asked them to pray with him, and they all fell asleep, probably drunk. And he started praying on his own, and he knew what lay ahead. He knew that his death was imminent, and it was hitting him full force. And of course, fear was coming up to his human self, and his prayer was, let this cup pass from me. Can I choose again? Can I take another path? And that's common for us to say, please take this away. But again, we remind ourselves, this is why my soul came here, for this, to feel this fear, to feel this human emotion, and it's okay to feel those doubts. What's important here is don't get stuck there. Go on to step 6, which is to trust the truth. And in Jesus' case, his truth was not what I want, but what you want. Think of not my will, but thine be done. Think of not my ego here, but the spirit within me. May its will be done in this case. Choosing that truth is what saves you and gets you through the rest that's going to happen. It's what allows you to finish this process. Charles Fillmore, here he comes, our co-founder of Unity, said that He's talking about God's will, and it's important to know, Jesus just said, not my will, but thine be done. What is God's will? What if God wants something for me that I don't want? So Charles Fillmore said, God's will is always perfection and all good for all his children. Now, I've heard parents say, I'm doing this because it's good for you. Okay, not that kind of good, all right? It's divine good. It's absolute. It's unharmable good. So good for all his children, perfect health in mind and body, abundance of every good thing, including joy, peace, wisdom, and eternal life. He does not will suffering or imperfection in any form. So trust the truth that if God is for us, who can be against us? Remember, one presence, and it's good and it's for us. There is no power working against us. Trust that. And then finally, step 7 is you got to take some action. At some point, you got to get up and start walking. He was in the garden, probably sitting on the dirt, and this taking action is what we speak of in unity as our 5th principle, that it's good to know all these principles, but unless you actually put them into effect, they don't do you any good. So we're talking about, in Jesus's case, getting up from the dirt and walking into the arms of his captor without struggle. Because he knew that had to be done in order for that ultimate demonstration to be made. I mean, this is someone who managed to find his way out of trouble all along. He would just kind of disappear from the crowd. He could have called on his disciples to draw their swords. One of them did, and he shut them down. And there's, he even said that he could have called on legions of angels to rescue him, but he did not. He had to act. He had to put himself again into that position where the final destination would be achieved, which was not only death, the important part, we are eternal beings. To me, that was his main mission, to prove we are eternal beings. When he talked about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom within us, we are eternal beings. He didn't need to live 50 years to talk about that. He just needed to demonstrate it to them. We are eternal beings. This physical experience you're having is not the real you. So, as I said, you may not come in with lofty goals like that, but every time somebody pushes your button and you find yourself in that anxious or hurt or angry mood, it's your chance to choose again. It's your opportunity for your soul to evolve, to wake up in the moment and go, I am an eternal being. I wanted this experience so that I could be reminded of what I am not. I am not a fearful being. I am at peace. Even when your ego is in fear, your soul is at peace. Is this making sense? The trick is finding it, right? The trick is knowing it and experiencing it, and it happens through these steps that we just went through. Up here on the screen, let's say them out loud together. Embrace your calling, persistently choose your highest thought, make plans, I'll look at yours. Release struggle, go with the flow, feel the fear, but don't get stuck, trust the truth, and take action. So let me just finish with Christian's comment about this. He said, your goal for being here is not to survive. In fact, your body won't survive. You understand that? Your goal is to shine joyfully as your true self, to bring the light of love into this experience, to grow toward genuine love, to process your fears, and to add the creation by being the real you. You are here to be genuine and to exercise true loving intent in common moments wherever you are. Let's take that to meditation. This is a chance for us to choose something that we can focus on. And it's easy for the mind, when you get quiet, it's easy for the mind to scream at you what's going wrong in your life. That's why most people don't like to be quiet, because they don't want to hear that. But if you're awake to who you really are, you can use this time to remember the dominant, eternal, unlimited presence that is your true self. So let's start by just closing our eyes. What we're doing is we're turning away from the physical senses of our being, the distractions. And the next thing is, what do I feel? You might just notice that there's something in my body that is distracting me. It may be a physical pain. It may be the temperature of the room or the feeling of the chair. Just acknowledge whatever it is. And without resistance, breathe peace into that catalyst, whatever it is. Breathe peace into that part of your body or that feeling from the chair, whatever it is. Just breathe peace into it. Let your breath just return to its normal state. Now your mind may turn to your to-do list or something that is going on in your life that you're not happy with. Just notice what is the first thing that comes to your mind. It's been part of your experience over the last week or month or lifetime. What's happening? And how do I feel about it? Worried, doubtful, irritated. What feeling is this challenge bringing up for you? No matter what the feeling, take a moment to realize who you really are. This has no power over me as a spiritual being. It cannot touch my true self, my true soul. I choose a higher thought now. I remember that my source of good is God. Nothing and no one can stand between me and God's infinite good. I turn away from the challenge and I turn toward Spirit, God, unlimited good, love. I release the heaviness of this physical life, this ego, and I embrace the divine presence. The loving source and infinite life that is the very core of my being. I feel grateful for for this presence. I feel gratitude filling my heart now that I am not alone, that the divine presence is always here expressing through me. All that I need comes to me. All that I need to know is easily revealed. My intention is love. Despite all human difficulty, I set the intention to love, to transform the limitations into the infinite presence of good. I give thanks that it is not I, the human, that must achieve this, but I let go and let love do its perfect work in my life and in the world. This is the truth of who I am, and now I let it be. So it is, and amen.